I never imagined that a free cup of coffee could save my life. For 9 months, I had been giving a homeless newspaper delivery man a cup of coffee every morning. One morning, he stopped me, his hands trembling, and whispered, "Don't go home. There's something in your basement." When he showed me the photos on his phone, my heart nearly stopped. That was the moment I realized the danger wasn't from a stranger, but from someone I once held dear. Hello everyone, welcome to this story. Before we continue, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from today? I love seeing where everyone is listening from. Just a quick note, some elements in this story are fictionalized for storytelling and educational purposes. Every morning at 5:45, I made the same cup of coffee for the same man. But that Tuesday morning, Henry didn't smile. His hands were shaking. I noticed it through the window before he even opened the door. His red 2008 Toyota Tacoma pulled into its usual spot, the engine cutting off with that familiar rattle. But Henry Martinez sat there for a long moment, gripping the steering wheel, staring at nothing. My name is Mike Rhodes. I'm 57 years old, owner of Rhodes Coffee House on Harbor Street in Riverside, Oregon. Until that morning, I believed my biggest problems were a failed marriage and a son who wouldn't return my calls. I was wrong about that. I was wrong about a lot of things. The bell chimed as Henry pushed through the door. Cold March air rushed in behind him, carrying the smell of rain and something else. Something that felt like dread. Henry Martinez was 63 years old, a newspaper delivery man who arrived at my shop every morning at 5:45. He drove that weathered red Tacoma like it was part of him, a man whose gentle dignity made you forget he slept in that truck most nights. For 9 months, he'd been the first customer of every day. For 9 months, I'd made him a cortado with heart art in the foam. I never charged him, but he always left whatever coins he had in his pocket on the counter, his quiet way of keeping his dignity. 9 months. That's how long Henry Martinez had been part of my mornings. How do you describe a friendship built on coffee and small kindnesses? You don't. You just live it. You learn that he takes his pastries warmed, not toasted. You learn that he reads 3 newspapers before sunrise and knows more about the town than anyone. You learn that loneliness has a face, and sometimes it just needs someone to see it. But that morning, Henry didn't go to his usual stool by the window. He stopped 3 feet inside the door and looked at me with eyes I didn't recognize. "Morning, Henry," I said, already reaching for his cup. "The usual." He didn't answer. The espresso machine hissed behind me, filling the silence with steam. The pastries sat warming in the display case, their sweetness suddenly wrong in the air. "Mike," his voice was lower than usual, serious. "Tell me about your son." The cup slipped in my hand. I caught it, but something else fell. Some sense of safety I hadn't known I was holding. "Danny." I set the cup down slowly. "Why are you asking about Danny?" Henry didn't sit down. He didn't order. He just stood there looking at me like I was already dead. "My son Danny was 26 years old. He'd stopped talking to me 3 years ago, right after the divorce. His mother got the house, half my savings, and apparently my son's loyalty. I'd tried calling, texting, showing up at his apartment once, which only made things worse. Eventually, I'd stopped trying. Some wounds you just learn to carry. "Henry, you're scaring me." I came around the counter. The wooden floor creaked under my feet. "What's going on?" He reached into his jacket pocket. His hands were still trembling worse now than before. I could see the veins standing out the knuckles, white with tension. "Last night," he said, "I was on my route. Riverside Drive, your street." "Okay." My throat tightened. "And I saw something, Mike." He pulled out his phone, the screen glowing pale in the dim morning light. "At your house. Something very wrong." My heart stopped. Actually stopped for one terrible moment. "I took photos," Henry said. "You need to see them." Henry stood before me with trembling hands and photographs of something terrible. But before I could see what was on that phone, I needed to tell you how we became friends. How 9 months of small kindnesses built the trust that would save my life. It started in June, the summer after my divorce became final. Henry's red Tacoma had broken down right outside my shop, steam pouring from under the hood like a distress signal. I'd watched through the window as he stood there, this dignified man in his 60s, staring at the mess with the quiet resignation of someone who'd seen too many things go wrong. I could have called him a tow truck. That's what most people would have done. Instead, I walked out with a cup of water and asked if I could take a look. Turned out to be a split radiator hose. I drove to the auto parts store, bought a replacement for $12, and spent the next 2 hours on my back in the parking lot, getting grease under my fingernails and sweat in my eyes. When I finished, Henry tried to pay me, pulled out his wallet with hands that were steadier, then offered me $40. I told him to come back for coffee sometime instead. You want to know the truth about kindness? It's selfish. Every cup of coffee I made Henry, every pastry I wrapped for him, every time I pretended not to notice, when he took the day-old muffins I would have thrown away, I wasn't doing it for him. I was doing it for me, because being kind to Henry was the only time I felt like the man I wanted to be. The divorce had taken everything, my wife, my house, my sense of who I was, but making someone's morning a little better, that I could still do. The next morning, Henry came back, 5:45 on the dot, ordered a cortado and sat by the window reading 3 newspapers he'd picked up on his route. Left a $5 tip on a $3 coffee, even though I tried to refuse it. The morning after that, he came again, and the morning after that. Soon it became ritual, sacred almost. I'd have his cortado ready by the time the bell chimed. Heart art in the foam because I'd watched YouTube videos to learn how. He'd tell me about the town, about things I'd never know from behind my counter, about the Hendersons' new baby and old Mrs. Patterson's rose garden and which houses on Riverside Drive left their porch lights on all night. Henry slept in that truck. I knew it. He knew I knew it. We never spoke about it. Some dignities are too important to name. Instead, I'd make sure there were always extra pastries warming in the display case. I'd accidentally brew too much coffee and offer him the surplus. Small kindnesses wrapped in plausible excuses. He smelled like newsprint and pine air freshener, that particular scent of someone who keeps their small space meticulously clean. His flannel shirts were worn but always pressed. His pride was the quietest, fiercest thing I'd ever witnessed. Through those 9 months of mornings, I found something I'd lost. Purpose, connection, the simple grace of mattering to someone, even if it was just for the time it took to drink a cortado. Every small kindness I gave Henry was a kindness I wished someone had given me during my darkest days. A hand reaching out, a moment of being seen. I never imagined he would repay it with my life, but standing there in my coffee shop watching Henry's trembling hands, I had to push those memories aside. The friendship that would save my life needed answers first. 5 minutes passed in silence. I set down my cup and asked, "Henry, what's wrong?" His answer was the last thing I expected. "Tell me about your son." I felt like I'd been punched. In 9 months of mornings, we'd talked about weather, sports, politics, the price of gas. Never family. Never the wound that wouldn't close. "Danny." My voice came out rough. "Why are you asking about Danny?" "Please." Henry's eyes held something I couldn't read. "I need to understand. Tell me about your son." So I told him. Magic coffee. That's what Danny called it when he was 7 years old. He'd sit on this very counter legs and swinging, watching me draw animals in the foam with a toothpick. A bear once, a cat. But the turtle was his favorite. I spent 20 minutes on that turtle, getting the shell pattern just right, and Danny talked about it for weeks afterward. That was 18 years ago. I haven't made magic coffee since. Danny Rhodes. My son had his mother's sharp cheekbones, but his grandmother's soft brown eyes. At 7, he was all wonder and laughter. At 25, the last time I saw him 3 weeks ago, he was thin and jittery with shadows under those soft eyes that scared me. The divorce did that to him. 5 years ago, Linda Rhodes, my ex-wife, ended 25 years of marriage with a lawyer's letter and a moving truck. She was 55, then still beautiful in that hard way some women get, and she took everything. The house in the nice part of town. Half my savings. And somehow, worst of all, my son's loyalty. Danny was 21 when we split. Old enough to understand, I thought. Old enough to see both sides. But he didn't. He blamed me for what I never fully understood. Maybe for not fighting harder. Maybe for fighting at all. I kept the coffee shop and the small house at 847 Riverside Drive. I kept my dignity mostly. I lost my son. Henry listened without interrupting, his coffee growing cold. 3 weeks ago, I continued, my throat tightening. Danny came in. First time in months. He looked bad. Thin. Shaking. He asked me for $200. I shook my head. I said no. That was the 41st time I'd said no, Henry. 41 times watching my son throw money away on things I couldn't name but could guess. 3 weeks ago, Danny asked how much my life was worth. $1.2 million. That's what I told him when he asked about my insurance. Linda is the primary beneficiary. Danny is secondary. He didn't blink, didn't say that's good or that's smart. He just nodded and something flickered in his eyes, something I couldn't name. Then he left. I'd pushed that conversation away, buried it under the routine of mornings, the comfort of coffee, the kindness of a friend named Henry. I hadn't let myself think about what that question might mean, but Henry was thinking about it. I could see it in his face. Mike? His voice was barely a whisper. I need to show you something. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. His hands were still shaking as he turned the screen toward me. I saw something at your house last night, he said. Something very wrong. I took photos. My heart stopped. The world stopped. And everything I thought I knew about my son was about to change forever. Henry handed me his phone. My hands trembled as I looked at the screen. The first photo was time-stamped 1:30 a.m. My house, my driveway, and my son's car. I recognized the gray Nissan Altima immediately. License plate OHT 4729. I'd bought Danny that car for his 21st birthday back, when I still believed money could fix what was breaking between us. Now it sat in my driveway in the middle of the night, and I hadn't been there to see it. Swipe right, Henry said quietly. There's more. Photo 2. Timestamp 1:47 a.m. A figure climbing out of my basement window, black tool bag in his hand. Face caught in the headlights of Henry's truck, frozen in that split second of exposure. I knew that face. I'd watched it take its first breath 25 years ago in a hospital room, where I cried harder than I'd ever cried in my life. Danny, my son, climbing out of my basement with a bag of tools at 2 a.m. Who was that? Henry asked, though his voice told me he already knew. That's... The word caught in my throat like broken glass. That's my son. I swiped again. Photo 3. Timestamp 3:15 a.m. Through the slats of my basement vent, barely visible in the darkness, a small device. A red LED blinking steadily, the only light in that black space. I went back, Henry said. Something didn't feel right. I could smell chemicals from outside the vent. Something sharp. Wrong. Photo 4. Close-up. The device filled the screen. Wires running to a small canister. A timer mechanism. Something that had no business being in anyone's home, let alone mine. What does a father do when he sees proof his child wants him dead? Does he call the police? Does he scream? Does he collapse? I did none of those things. I just stood there, phone in my trembling hand, trying to make the photos mean something else. Anything else. Mike. Henry's voice cut through the fog. That device is dangerous. I don't know exactly what it does, but I've seen enough to know. Don't go home tonight. Promise me. I looked up at him, this man who slept in his truck, this man who delivered newspapers before dawn and spent his nights driving through neighborhoods he didn't live in, checking on houses that weren't his. This man who had no reason to care whether I lived or died, except that I'd once fixed his radiator and made him coffee every morning since. Why were you at my house? I asked, though it wasn't really the question I wanted answered. I'll explain later. Right now I need you to promise. I reached into my pocket and pulled out $50, pressed it into his hand before he could refuse. I promise, I said. The words felt hollow. Everything felt hollow. Henry studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. He turned and walked out the door, the bell chiming behind him like it did every morning. Like nothing had changed. Like my world hadn't just ended. I watched his red Tacoma pull away taillights, disappearing down Harbor Street in the gray dawn light. The coffee shop was silent. The espresso machine had gone cold. Outside, the sun was rising on a day I wasn't sure I wanted to face. I looked down at the phone still in my hand. The device, the red LED, the wires, and the canister. My son's face caught in the headlights climbing out of my basement. I whispered to the empty room, what if he's wrong? But somewhere deep inside, in a place I couldn't reach, I already knew the answer. I couldn't focus. At 7:30, I spilled an entire gallon of milk. It spread across the counter like something dying white and slow, and I just stood there watching it drip onto the floor. The photos on Henry's phone kept flashing through my mind. Danny's car, Danny's face, that blinking red light in my basement. At 9:15, I burned a batch of bagels. The smoke alarm screamed until Jenny, my 20-year-old barista, with her bright purple streak and otherwise brown hair, climbed on a chair to wave a towel at it. She looked at me with the kind of concern that comes from watching your boss fall apart in real time. "Mike, are you okay? You look terrible." "Just didn't sleep well. I'm fine." I wasn't fine. At 10:40, I gave a customer a 20 instead of a 10 and change. At 11:20, I dropped a stack of ceramic cups that shattered across the floor like my composure. Jenny cleaned it up without a word. I think she was afraid of me. 4 times I called my son that day. 4 times I heard his voicemail. 4 times I said, "Call me back, Danny," into the void. What was I going to say if he answered, "Did you plant something in my basement? Are you trying to hurt me?" Some questions destroy the asker no matter the answer. At 2:30 in the afternoon, I got in my car to drive home. I made it 3 blocks before I pulled over, hands shaking on the wheel. I'd promised Henry. I'd looked into that man's eyes and given him my word. Even if I didn't fully believe the danger, I couldn't break that promise. I turned around. At 5 o'clock, I closed the shop early for the first time in 9 months. Jenny didn't ask why. She just grabbed her bag and left, probably relieved to get away from me. I drove past my house at 5:45. It looked exactly the same as always. Porch light on the timer, lawn needing a mow, nothing wrong, nothing at all. And somehow that made everything worse. If the house looked haunted, at least I'd have proof. But it just sat there normal and silent, keeping its secrets. At 6:15, I called Tom Brennan, my 65-year-old neighbor and retired firefighter with 30 years of service. Tom had the kind of voice that made you trust him. Immediately calm and steady, ready for emergencies. "Tom, it's Mike. I'm going out of town tonight. Business thing. Could you keep an eye on my place?" "Sure thing, Mike." A pause. "Everything okay?" "Everything's fine." Another lie. They were coming easier now. At 8 o'clock, I went back to the shop and lay down on the couch in my office. The leather was cold. The ceiling was dark. I stared at nothing and tried not to think about the device with the red blinking light. I tried not to imagine what it might do. I tried not to picture my son's face caught in Henry's headlights, climbing out of my basement window with a bag of tools. I didn't sleep. Every sound was a threat. Every creak of the building settling made my heart race. The hours crawled past like wounded animals. At 2 in the morning, my phone rang. Unknown number. The screen glowed in the darkness, insistent, demanding. I stared at it. My thumb hovered over the answer button. But I was exhausted and paranoid and couldn't imagine any good news coming at 2 in the morning. I let it go to voicemail. The ringing stopped. Silence returned. The notification appeared, "New voicemail, duration 47 seconds. I closed my eyes and told myself I'd check the message in the morning. I would regret that decision for the rest of my life. At 3:30 a.m., I lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling still haunted by that missed call at 2. The unknown number. The voicemail I hadn't checked. Then my phone rang again. This time I answered. "Mr. Rhodes." The voice was professional controlled. "This is Captain Ross Martin, Riverside Fire Department. Are you inside 847 Riverside Drive?" My blood turned to ice. No, I'm at my shop. Why, what happened?" A pause. "Then, sir, you're very lucky you weren't home tonight. There's been a carbon monoxide incident at your residence. You need to come here now." Carbon monoxide. The device. The blinking red light. Henry was right. I don't remember grabbing my keys. I don't remember starting the car. I remember driving 90 miles an hour through empty streets, running 2 red lights, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the wheel. And the only thought in my head over and over like a prayer. Henry was right. Henry was right. Henry was right. I was supposed to be dead right now, asleep in my bed, breathing poison, never waking up. My son had tried to kill me, and a newspaper delivery man had saved my life. I arrived at 847 Riverside Drive at 3:55. 3 fire trucks blocked the street, their lights painting my house in alternating red and white. Neighbors stood on the sidewalk in robes and slippers, drawn out by the sirens whispering and pointing. My house looked exactly the same as always. That was the terrible part. It looked so normal. Tom Brennan came running toward me before I even got out of the car. His face was pale, his hands shaking as he grabbed my arm. Mike, oh God, Mike, I thought you were inside. Tom, what happened? Oh, I smelled something at 2:45. His voice cracked. Chemical. Wrong. Something I recognized from my training. I called 911 right away. They said carbon monoxide. Lethal levels. Mike, I thought you were dead. I thought I was going to watch them carry you out. I put my hand on his shoulder to steady him, or maybe to steady myself. Captain Ross Martin approached us, then a man of 52, with a face weathered by decades of smoke and tragedy. He carried a clear plastic evidence bag, and his expression told me everything before he opened his mouth. Mr. Rhodes. He stopped in front of me, holding up the bag. I need you to look at this. Inside the evidence bag was a metal device about the size of a pack of cigarettes. Wires ran to a small canister. A circuit board glinted under the streetlights. And there on the side, a red LED still blinking steadily. Even now, even after everything. I recognized it from Henry's photos. The same device, the same faint light. The very thing my son had hidden in my basement, something that was never meant to protect me. We found this in your heating vent, Captain Ross said. It was designed to release carbon monoxide on a timer. The concentration inside your house reached 520 parts per million. Lethal exposure in 15 to 30 minutes. He paused, letting the numbers sink in. If you'd been asleep in there tonight, you wouldn't have woken up. I stared at the blinking red light. Such a small thing. Such a simple mechanism. And it would have killed me if not for a promise made to a friend. Captain Ross's voice dropped harder now. Mr. Rhodes, this wasn't an accident. This wasn't a malfunction or a gas leak or bad luck. Someone installed this device in your home deliberately. He looked me dead in the eyes. Someone tried to harm you tonight. Captain Ross led me closer to the evidence table set up beside the fire truck. My legs felt like water. Under the harsh emergency lights, the device looked almost innocent, just metal and wires and a small canister. Then he started explaining what it would have done to me. This is a carbon monoxide emitter, Captain Ross said, his voice clinical, detached. Placed in your basement vent for maximum dispersal throughout the house. Timer A was set for 3:30 a.m. activation. 3:30? I had been lying on my office couch at 3:30, staring at the ceiling, thinking about that missed call. At this concentration, 520 parts per million, you'd be unconscious within 15 minutes, dead within 30. He let that sink in. If you'd been asleep in your bedroom, you would have stopped breathing by 4 a.m. Your heart would have stopped by 4:15. You wouldn't have woken up. Let me make sure you understand what Captain Ross was telling me. If I had been in my bed at 3:30 a.m., like I was supposed to be, like I would have been if not for Henry, I would have breathed poison for 15 minutes without waking. By 4 a.m., I would have stopped breathing. By 4:15, my heart would have stopped. By 6 a.m., there would have been nothing left but ashes and a life insurance claim. My son had planned all of this, but that's not all, Captain Ross continued. There was a second timer, timer B set for 5:30 a.m. Incendiary component. He pointed to a small section of the device I hadn't noticed, designed to start a fire, burn the house, destroy all evidence. I gripped the edge of the evidence table. The metal was cold under my fingers. By 6 a.m., he said, this would have looked like a tragic gas leak accident. No murder investigation, no crime scene, just a house fire with one victim. Coroner rules it accidental. Case closed. The perfect crime. That's what my son had built. A system designed to kill me silently, then burn away the proof. And in the morning, everyone would shake their heads at the tragedy. Poor Mike Rhodes. Such a shame. At least he had good life insurance. $1.2 million. That's what my death was worth to someone. Officer Mike Reyes arrived then, a fit 35-year-old, with the focused intensity of someone who ran marathons for fun. He carried a notepad and wore an expression I'd seen before on cop shows, professional curiosity mixed with suspicion. Mr. Rhodes, I need to ask some routine questions. He clicked his pen. Anyone with a grudge against you, disputes with neighbors' business partners. I shook my head. Any enemies you can think of. Someone from your past. I shook my head again. Any financial problems? Anyone who might benefit from... He paused, glancing at the evidence bag with the device. From something happening to you. The insurance. Linda was the primary beneficiary. Danny was secondary. $1.2 million split between them if I died. I said nothing. Officer Reyes studied my face with those cop eyes that had seen every kind of lie. He could tell I was holding something back. I could see him calculating, wondering what a man might hide at 4 a.m. while standing in front of his own crime scene. Any enemies, Mr. Rhodes? He asked again. I shook my head. Any disputes, business problems? No. Then he asked the question that would unravel everything. Any family who might want to hurt you? I opened my mouth. The word formed on my tongue. Danny. My son. He was here last night. I have photos. I know who did this. Nothing came out. I couldn't speak. I stood there frozen, Officer Reyes, waiting for an answer I couldn't give when a familiar red Tacoma pulled through the chaos of fire trucks and flashing lights. Henry Martinez stepped out at 4:12 a.m. phone in hand and walked straight toward us with the calm purpose of a man who knew exactly what needed to be done. I have evidence, he said to Officer Reyes, holding up a small SD card. Dashcam footage, photos, all time-stamped. Reyes looked at him. Who are you? Henry glanced at me, then back at the officer. The man who saved his life. I pulled the memory card before I came here. I knew you'd need it. Detective Sarah Jenkins arrived at 4:20, a sharp-eyed woman of 42 with close-cropped graying hair and the kind of calm authority that made you believe everything would be handled. She took one look at the scene, spoke briefly with Captain Ross, then came to examine Henry's evidence. I already knew the photos. Danny's car in my driveway, Danny climbing from my basement window, the device, the wires. I'd seen them all that morning at the coffee shop when Henry first showed me what my son had done. But I hadn't seen the video. There's more, Henry said quietly. Dashcam footage, night vision. Detective Jenkins pressed play. 22 seconds. That's all it took to destroy what was left of my hope. The footage showed my basement window from outside, a figure closing it from the exterior. Then the figure turned toward the camera, toward Henry's parked truck, and the green glow of night vision illuminated my son's face. I'm sorry, Dad. 3 words, 22 seconds of video. My son closing the basement window of my house at 1:47 a.m., looking directly at the camera at me somehow across time and whispering an apology before walking away. He knew. He knew what he was doing. He knew it was wrong, and he did it anyway. I watched Danny walk to his gray Nissan Altima license plate, OHT 4729, and drive away into the darkness. The video ended. Mr. Rhodes? Detective Jenkins's voice was gentle but firm. Do you know this person? I couldn't look away from the screen. The frozen frame of my son's face mouth still forming that terrible apology. That's my son, I said. The words came out broken, barely audible. That's Danny. Jenkins exchanged a look with Reyes, the kind of look that said this case just got more complicated and more tragic. Play it again, I heard myself say. She did. I watched my son close the window, turn, whisper into the darkness, walk away. Again. The third time I noticed details I'd missed. The tool bag over his shoulder, the way he hesitated before speaking, the slight tremble in his hands, the same trembling I'd seen in Henry's hands that morning at the coffee shop. My son had been scared. He'd known what he was doing was monstrous. And he'd done it anyway, left me to die, walked away into the night with an apology on his lips like that made it better. Henry put his hand on my shoulder. I didn't push it away. I stood there in the cold March darkness, surrounded by fire trucks and police cars' emergency lights, painting everything red and white. My house behind me, the house where I was supposed to have died. My neighbor Tom watching from his porch, unable to come closer. Detective Jenkins already making calls, launching an investigation into my own son. Tears ran down my face. I didn't wipe them away. I watched the video one more time. My son caught in the dash cam's green glow, whispering 3 words into the void before walking away from my grave. I'm sorry, Dad. How do you survive learning that your child wanted you dead? The question echoed in my mind as Detective Jenkins led me to Captain Martin's command vehicle. How do you survive learning your child wanted you dead? I didn't have an answer. I wasn't sure I ever would. Inside the cramped vehicle, surrounded by monitors and radio equipment, Jenkins sat across from me. Dawn was breaking outside, painting my almost grave in pale orange light. "Mr. Rhodes," she said, her voice gentle but firm, "I need to understand motive. Why would your son want you dead?" The word came out before I could stop it. "Money." She waited. "I think it's about money," I said, forcing the words out. "My life insurance policy. $1.2 million. Jenkins wrote something in her notepad. "Who's the beneficiary?" "Linda, my ex-wife. She's the primary." I swallowed hard. "Danny is secondary. $1.2 million. That's what my life was worth. That's the number someone calculated when they decided I should die. Not enough to be wealthy. Not enough to change anyone's life forever. Just enough to kill for. Insurance companies don't pay out for murder, Mr. Rhodes," Jenkins said. "Only accidents. That's why the device was designed the way it was. The CO would harm you silently. The fire would destroy the evidence. By morning it would look like a tragic gas leak. Coroner rules, accidental death. Insurance pays out. The logic was so clean, so cold, so carefully planned. My son tried to kill me. I heard myself say for money." Jenkins didn't answer. She didn't need to. I thought back to 3 weeks ago. February 22nd. Danny had come into the coffee shop looking thin, jittery shadows under his eyes. He'd asked me for $200. I'd said no. It was the 41st time I'd said no, watching my son spiral while refusing to fund whatever was destroying him. Then he'd asked the question that haunted me now. "How much life insurance do you have?" It had seemed like small talk. Awkward small talk, but nothing sinister. I'd told him $1.2 million. Your mother's the primary beneficiary. You're secondary. "Not me," Danny had asked with a strange intensity I hadn't understood at the time. I'd explained that it made sense for Linda to be primary. We'd set it up years ago before the divorce. Danny's eyes had flickered with something. Relief, excitement. I couldn't read it then. I could read it now. That question wasn't curiosity, it was reconnaissance. Back in the command vehicle, Jenkins slid a piece of paper across the table. "We pulled your son's phone records," she said. "He's been in regular contact with your ex-wife. 47 calls. 6 months. My ex-wife and my son talking for hours while I made coffee for strangers and wondered why Danny never called me back. They were planning. They were scheming. They were deciding how much my death was worth and how to collect it." I looked at the paper. Call logs, dates, durations. 47 conversations between September and March. Most were 15 to 40 minutes. Some were longer. "The longest call," Jenkins said, pointing to a line near the bottom, "was March 14th, 10:30 p.m., 62 minutes. March 14th, the night before Danny climbed through my basement window. I stared at the numbers. My hands were shaking. 62 minutes. That's how long it took to finalize a murder plan. That's how long my ex-wife and my son talked the night before they tried to kill me. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Danny's question about insurance, the phone calls, the timing. This wasn't just my son's idea. This wasn't Danny acting alone in some desperate drug-fueled moment. This was orchestrated. "She put him up to this?" I whispered the words, barely audible. "Didn't she?" Jenkins didn't answer my question about Linda. She didn't need to. Instead, she picked up her radio and ordered her tactical team to move. 6 a.m. I sat in her unmarked car outside Eastside Apartments in Portland, watching through the windshield as officers in tactical gear approached the building. Apartment 3F, my son's apartment. In minutes, they would arrest him for trying to kill me. The morning air was cold. My breath fogged the window. Everything felt unreal, like watching a movie where I already knew the ending, but couldn't change a single frame. At 6:07, they breached the door. I heard the muffled shout through the distance. "Police, don't move!" Then chaos. Shouting. The sound of something crashing. A window opening on the fire escape. An officer's voice. "He's running!" I watched my son appear on the second-floor fire escape landing, scrambling toward the ladder. An officer tackled him before he made it 3 steps. Danny went down hard, and even from the car I could hear his scream. They dragged my son out of his apartment building in handcuffs. His face was tear-streaked, hollow, terrified. This wasn't the boy who made magic coffee turtles at age 7. This wasn't even the jittery young man who asked about my insurance 3 weeks ago. This was someone broken beyond recognition, someone desperate, someone destroyed. I didn't do it! Danny was sobbing, his voice cracking. I didn't mean to. I stepped out of the car. I don't know why. Maybe I needed him to see me. Maybe I needed to see him. Danny's eyes found mine across the parking lot. For one terrible moment, everything stopped. Then he screamed. Dad, I called you at 2 a.m. I tried to stop it. My blood went cold. I called you. Why didn't you answer? I tried to warn you. The 2 a.m. call. The unknown number. I let it ring. I let it go to voicemail. While I lay on that couch, wondering if Henry was wrong, my son was calling to tell me to run, and I didn't answer. I fumbled for my phone hands, shaking so badly I could barely navigate to the voicemail. One new message, 2:03 a.m., duration 47 seconds. I pressed play. Danny's voice came through the speaker, young, terrified, barely holding together. Dad, don't go home tonight, please. A pause. Ragged breathing, the sound of someone crying. I'm so sorry, don't go home. 47 seconds of my son begging me to live. I looked up. Across the parking lot, they were loading Danny into a police car. His eyes were still on me, tears streaming down his face, mouthing words I couldn't hear. Maybe I'm sorry. Maybe I love you. Maybe both. My legs gave out. Jenkins caught my arm before I hit the pavement, guiding me back against the car. Mr. Rhodes, Mike, are you okay? I wasn't okay. I would never be okay again. My son had planted a device in my basement designed to kill me in my sleep. He had researched it, purchased it, installed it. He had done all of that. And then he had called me at 2 a.m. to beg me not to go home. He had tried to murder me, and then he had tried to save me. Both things were true. Both things existed in the same 26-year-old boy who was now being driven away in the back of a police car, sobbing, broken, destroyed. I slid down the side of the car until I was sitting on the cold pavement, the phone still clutched in my hand, Danny's voicemail still echoing in my head. What had she done to him? 3 hours later, after giving my statement, Jenkins called me into her office. 9 a.m. She had a folder open on her desk, evidence from Danny's apartment spread across the surface. Mr. Rhodes, she said, I need to show you what we found. It's going to be difficult to see. She wasn't wrong. First, the schematics. Carbon monoxide device plans downloaded from a dark web forum 3 months ago. Then a receipt for $340 worth of materials, dated February 28th. Then a handwritten note in Danny's handwriting that made my stomach turn. Timer A3:30 a.m. Timer B5:30 a.m. Basement vent. He'll never know. He'll never know. My son wrote that about killing me. But the worst was the text messages. These are from a burner phone, Jenkins explained. We traced it to your ex-wife's neighborhood. She turned her tablet toward me. 6 months of messages between Danny and Linda. 6 months of manipulation I never knew existed. February 10th. He has $1.2 million. You deserve it. February 18th. He abandoned you. March 1st. If you don't do this, we'll lose everything. March 14th, 10:47 p.m. tonight. Don't contact me after. Danny's response. March 16th, 1:55 a.m. It's done. He'll be gone by morning. And then Linda's final message. 2:03 a.m. Delete everything. I'll see you soon, baby. I read those words 3 times. Baby. My ex-wife called our son baby after he confirmed he'd planted a device to kill me. What kind of monster uses that word with her own child in a murder conspiracy? At 2 p.m., I stood behind a one-way mirror at Columbia County Jail, watching Danny's interrogation. He sat in an orange jumpsuit, handcuffed to the table, hollow-eyed and broken. 25 years old, the boy I once knew, the young man who called at 2 a.m. begging me to live. Now he sat there destroyed, confessing to things no child should ever have to say about their mother. Your father's alive, Jenkins told him through the speaker. He's safe. Danny's face crumpled, relief and shame fighting for control. She said he didn't love me anymore, Danny sobbed. Said he replaced me. Said the only way I'd matter was if he was gone and I had his money. Tell me about your relationship with your mother, Jenkins said carefully. Danny's hands shook. She called me 6 months ago, invited me over, started being nice. gave me money. $200 a week for substances, for favors. My stomach turned. In January, she brought up the insurance. Said we deserved it. Said Dad owed us. Danny was crying openly now. In February, she sent me links. Instructions. On March 10th, she showed me how to get into Dad's basement through the window. And on March 14th, he couldn't finish. What happened on March 14th? Jenkins pressed. She called at 10:30, she said. Danny's voice cracked. Tonight or never, prove you love me. Jenkins leaned forward. Danny, did you have a relationship with your mother beyond familial? The silence stretched for an eternity. She said we'd be together? Danny whispered. After. She said I was the only man who understood her. She's not my mother. I don't know what she is. I watched my son sob through the glass, and something inside me snapped. I slammed my fist against the observation room wall. The concrete didn't move, only the dull ache in my hand grew sharper. Mr. Rhodes! Jenkins burst through the door, grabbing my arm. Mike, stop! I couldn't stop. I couldn't feel my hand. All I could feel was the rage, volcanic, bottomless, aimed at the woman who had taken my son and twisted him into a weapon. My ex-wife hadn't just tried to kill me. She had destroyed my child first. My ex-wife hadn't just tried to kill me. She had destroyed my child first. 4 p.m. My knuckles throbbed under fresh gauze as Jenkins opened her laptop. She turned the screen toward me. A man in an Italian suit stared back, his smile practiced and predatory. Richard Castellano was 48 years old, the kind of financial advisor who made you feel like increasing your life insurance was the smartest decision you'd ever make. Turns out it was the decision that almost killed me. He sold you your original policy in 2019, Jenkins said, and convinced you to increase it to $1.2 million last January. I remembered that meeting, Richard's firm handshake, his reassurance that I was protecting my family. My family. The word tasted like ash now. They have a joint bank account, Jenkins continued. $15,000 in transfers since September. Linda's been living rent-free in his Portland condo since February. They're lovers, Mike. Let me make sure you understand what Jenkins was telling me. The man who advised me to increase my life insurance wasn't looking out for my family. He was planning my murder. Every handshake, every smart financial move was preparation for a grave. Then Jenkins showed me the signal messages recovered from Danny's apartment, March 5th. Boy is ready. The response, after the boy has accident. March 8th. How eliminate Daniel? The answer, fentanyl. He's addict. No one will question. My stomach dropped. They were going to kill Danny too. And Henry. She scrolled to March 16th, 4 a.m. What about newspaper guy will handle it? 3 intended victims. Me, my son, the man who saved my life. Jenkins proposed a sting operation. Danny calls Linda from a monitored jail line. Claims he kept quiet. Asks her to visit. Hidden cameras record everything. It's our best shot at getting both of them, she said. If you are still here with me, I'd love to know that you're still part of this journey. Please drop a comment with the word loyalty to let me know you're watching. Your support is what keeps these stories alive. And a quick heads up, the next part of this story contains some fictionalized details and dramatized elements. If that's not for you, you may want to stop the video right here. But for those staying, the truth is about to get much deeper. At 6:30, I sat across from Danny through plexiglass phone receiver, cold against my ear. Orange jumpsuit, hollow eyes, 25 years old and destroyed. Silence stretched between us. I got your voicemail, I finally said. The 2 a.m. call. His voice cracked. I tried to stop it. I know. I looked at my son, the boy I'd raised, the young man who called at 2 a.m. begging me to live, the broken person used as a weapon by his own mother. How could I not forgive him? He was the victim. We both were. I explained the trap. Danny shook his head. She'll know I'm lying. Then don't lie. Tell her you love her. Make her believe you're still hers. Then I said what I should have said years ago. I failed you, Danny. I wasn't there after the divorce. I let her poison you. But I'm here now. Help me stop the woman who destroyed you. Danny's eyes glistened. If I do this, will you forgive me? Tears ran down my face. I already have. He picked up the jail phone. I watched from the observation room as he dialed the number he knew by heart. It rang once, twice. "Hello?" Linda's voice cold even through the speakers. Danny's hands trembled, but his voice held steady. "Mom, I need you." The phone weighed nothing, but Danny's hand trembled like he was holding a loaded gun. I stood in the observation room, palm flat, against the cold one-way glass, watching my son prepare to lie for his life. Through the speakers, Linda's voice came thin and cold. "Danny, I told you not to contact me. We agreed." "Mom, please." Danny's voice cracked perfectly. "They're saying 20 years. The lawyer says I need bail. $500,000. Silence. 3 heartbeats. "I don't have that kind of money, Danny. I didn't tell them anything, Mom." Danny let the words hang in the air. "Nothing about you. Nothing about any of it." Another pause. Longer this time. I watched the seconds tick by on the recording equipment. That's good. Danny pressed forward. "They found the device. They know it wasn't an accident. But they think I acted alone. They think I'm just some stupid addict who wanted Dad's money early. And that's what you told them. That's what they believe." Danny's voice steadied, gaining confidence. "Mom, I just need to see you. One visit. Please. I'm so scared. I haven't slept in 2 days. 20 years, Mom? I'll be 45 when I get out." The institutional smell of disinfectant burned my nostrils. My coffee had gone cold hours ago, but I couldn't move to set it down. Couldn't look away from my son's performance. "Danny," Linda's voice shifted slightly. "Please, just come see me tomorrow. I need to see your face. I need to know someone still—" His voice broke. The tears that ran down his cheeks weren't fake. This was the part he didn't have to act. Silence stretched through the speakers. I stopped breathing. Then Linda's voice changed. The coldness melted into something else. Something that made my stomach turn. "I'll come tomorrow, baby. First thing, 9 o'clock. Danny closed his eyes. "Thank you, Mom. Thank you. Get some sleep. I'll be there by 9. The line went dead. Danny held the receiver for a long moment, then placed it back in its cradle with trembling hands. He slumped against the gray institutional wall, all the strength draining from his body. Jenkins stopped the recording. "We got it." She acknowledged the device, agreed to a recorded visit. 9 a.m. tomorrow. I barely heard her. My eyes were fixed on Danny through the glass. A guard came to escort him back to his cell. As Danny stood, he turned toward the observation window, toward where he knew I was standing, even though he couldn't see me. His lips moved, forming 2 words. "I'm sorry." The phone weighed nothing, but Danny's hand trembled like he was holding a loaded gun. I stood in the observation room, palm flat, against the cold one-way glass, watching my son prepare to lie for his life. Jenkins's recording equipment blinked red beside me. The trap was set. The call lasted 8 minutes. Through the observation room speakers, I heard every word, every calculated lie, every moment Danny played the desperate son needing his mother. He asked about bail. Linda deflected. He mentioned the device. She went silent. He promised he hadn't told the police anything. Her voice softened. He begged to see her face. She agreed to visit at 9 a.m. When the call ended, Jenkins turned to me. "We got it." She acknowledged the device and agreed to a recorded visit. Danny slumped in his chair, the performance draining him. He turned toward the one-way glass where he knew I stood watching. His lips moved silently. "She's coming. March 18th, 2025, 9 o'clock in the morning. 4 cameras, 6 microphones, 1 chance." Detective Jenkins stood at the whiteboard in the Columbia County Jail conference room, drawing lines between equipment positions while I tried to keep my hands from shaking. She had done this before. I could see it in the way she moved, confident and precise. "We need her to acknowledge the plan, the device, or the insurance," Jenkins said. "Any one of those, and we have her." Guard Gary Adams stood 6'4", with shoulders like a linebacker and eyes that missed nothing. 20 years at Columbia County Jail had taught him to read inmates and the people who visited them. Today his job was simple: keep Danny alive. "I'll be 10 feet away," Gary said. "If Danny puts his hand flat on the table, I pull him out." No hesitation. Tech specialist David Foster looked barely 30 with wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of quiet intensity that came from years of listening to other people's secrets through headphones. He adjusted a monitor showing 4 empty chairs in the visitation room. "The mics are sensitive enough to pick up a whisper," David said. "If she says it, we've got it. What if she doesn't say anything?" The question escaped me before I could stop it. What if she's smarter than we think? Jenkins turned to face me. Then we wait for Richard. He's the weak link. She paused. But Linda loves to talk when she thinks she's won. 5 hours. That's how long I sat in that observation room, watching screens show empty chairs, waiting for my ex-wife to walk through security so my son could lie to her face. 5 hours to wonder. What kind of mother looks at her child in handcuffs and sees opportunity? I drank 5 cups of bitter coffee. I watched the clock. I watched the monitors. I watched Jenkins check her equipment every 30 minutes with the patience of someone who understood that waiting was part of the job. At 1 o'clock sharp, a white Lexus pulled into the parking lot. My stomach dropped. My stomach dropped. Linda stepped out wearing a cream cashmere coat that probably cost more than Danny's bail. Her expression was controlled, measured. She looked like she was arriving at a business meeting, not visiting her imprisoned son. I watched her move through security on the monitors. Metal detector, bag check, ID verification. She submitted to each step with mild irritation, like the procedures were beneath her. Her perfume probably cost more than my monthly rent. At 1:50, she cleared the final checkpoint. At 1:58, Danny was brought to the visitation room. Orange jumpsuit, handcuffs catching the fluorescent light. He looked small, somehow diminished by the institutional gray walls pressing in around him. Jenkins touched my shoulder. "It's time." I couldn't respond. My eyes were fixed on the monitor showing the visitation room. 2 chairs, a plexiglass partition smudged with 1,000 desperate handprints, phone receivers on both sides. Linda entered at exactly 2 o'clock. She walked to her chair with the same measured stride she'd used at our divorce proceedings. No rush, no emotion. She sat down and looked at Danny through the plexiglass. I held my breath. She didn't ask if he was okay. She didn't say she was sorry. She didn't reach toward the glass the way mothers do when they see their children suffering. She picked up the phone receiver with one manicured hand, stared at Danny's face for a long moment. Then she smiled cold and sharp like a blade being drawn from its sheath. "You look terrible, baby." Linda's first move was to scan the room for cameras. She found 2, missed the other 4. I leaned closer to the monitor in Jenkins's observation room, gripping the desk edge until my knuckles went white. Through the screen, I watched my ex-wife settle into her chair with the composure of someone who had rehearsed this moment. "Don't call me that here," Linda said, her voice sharp. "Cameras?" Danny nodded, playing the chastened son. "I didn't tell them anything. Not about you. Not about any of it." "Good." Linda's posture relaxed slightly. "If anyone asks you were intoxicated, you didn't know what you were doing, temporary insanity, your lawyer can work with that." She was coaching him, on a recorded line, in a room with 6 hidden microphones. Jenkins made a note, but I couldn't look away from the screen. For the next several minutes, Linda controlled the conversation like a conductor leading an orchestra. She asked about his cellmate, about his lawyer, about whether anyone had mentioned her name specifically. Each question designed to assess her own exposure, not her son's well-being. Then Danny changed the script. "What about us?" His voice dropped vulnerable. "After this resolves, will we still—" Linda's face shifted. Something warm flickered behind her eyes. Something that made my stomach turn. "We will," she said softly. "Once this is over, I promise." 9 minutes in, and I watched my ex-wife promise my son a future together. Not as mother and child, as something else. Something that made Jenkins look away from the monitor. Something that made me want to put my fist through the screen. Danny pressed forward. "The insurance money. The 1.2 million. When does that—" The warmth vanished from Linda's face like someone had flipped a switch. She stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the concrete floor. "We're done here." "Mom, wait. I said we're done." She was already turning toward the door. Jenkins swore under her breath. The trap was failing. Linda had recognized something in Danny's question, some shift in his desperation that didn't ring true. She was going to walk out, and we'd have nothing but circumstantial coaching on tape. Danny's face contorted. I watched him make a decision in real time. "I did it for you." The scream tore through the speakers, raw and broken. "Everything I did was for you. The device, the basement, all of it. And now you're just going to leave me here." Linda froze with her hand on the door. "You said we'd be together." Danny continued, his voice cracking. You said after Dad was gone, we could finally... Shut up. Linda's voice was ice. What about Richard? The name hit the room like a bomb. Linda went completely still. I stopped breathing. Jenkins leaned forward. For 3 eternal seconds, nobody moved. Then Linda turned around slowly. Her eyes locked on Danny with an expression I'd never seen in 30 years of marriage. Not anger, not fear, something colder, something calculating. She walked back to her chair, sat down, picked up the phone receiver she'd abandoned. How do you know about Richard? The question was barely above a whisper, but the microphones caught every syllable. Her asking that question was an admission. Richard existed. Richard mattered. Richard was part of whatever she'd planned. Jenkins's hand moved to her radio. Not yet. We needed more. Danny wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. His voice steadied. I know everything, Mom. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Linda sat back slowly, her eyes locked on Danny like a predator reassessing its prey. How do you know about Richard? Danny leaned forward, and for the first time since this nightmare began, he wasn't acting. I'm not stupid, Mom. I saw the messages. I know about Richard. It was a bluff. Danny hadn't seen anything, but Linda didn't know that. I watched her face shift on the monitor, watched the calculation behind her eyes as she decided the game was already lost. Then you know it was his idea, Linda said, her voice dropping. All of it. Richard convinced your father to increase the policy. He found the device online. I just went along with it. Jenkins made a note. Linda was already trying to shift blame, but she was confessing. Every word recorded. And what about me? Danny's voice hardened. What was I supposed to get out of this? Linda tilted her head, and something terrible flickered across her face. Something like pity. You were going to have an accident too, baby. 6 months later, fentanyl. She said it like she was discussing grocery lists. 1.2 million split 2 ways is better than 3. Danny went still. This wasn't part of the script. This wasn't something Jenkins had prepared him for. His shock was real, raw, devastating. You were going to kill me too. Split 2 ways is better than 3. My ex-wife had done the math. My life was worth $600,000. My son's life was worth the same. And she'd calculated both figures without hesitation. Linda shrugged. Richard said it was cleaner that way. No witnesses, no complications. Guard Gary Adams stepped into the visitation room. Linda saw him, and her expression shifted to defiance. You'll never make this stick, she said. It's his word against mine. Jenkins walked in behind Adams' badge in hand. Linda Rhodes, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and insurance fraud. Everything you just said was recorded on 6 microphones and 4 cameras. Linda's face went pale. She looked at the ceiling, at the walls, finally seeing what she'd missed. Her composure cracked for one moment before the mask slammed back into place. I want a lawyer. They led her away in handcuffs. I watched through the monitor as my ex-wife of 30 years walked out of the visitation room. Her designer coat wrinkled, her careful plans in ruins. But it wasn't over. At 2:45, Officer Reyes called from the Portland airport. Richard Castellano had been arrested trying to board a one-way flight to Mexico City. They found $300,000 in his carry-on and a new passport in a different name. Richard Castellano looked nothing like a mastermind when they dragged him into Columbia County Jail an hour later. 48 years old, thinning hair plastered with sweat, a man who'd sold me my insurance policy and planned my death. He couldn't stop shaking. They put him in intake room B, 3 doors down from where Linda was being processed. Through the cinder block walls, sound carried. It took less than 5 minutes for him to break. It was her idea. Richard's voice cracked loud enough to echo through the corridor. All of it. She approached me last year. I never wanted anyone harmed. She said it would be easy, said no one would ever know. 3 doors away, Linda heard every word through the concrete. Her scream of rage shook the hallway. You coward, you lying coward, I'll destroy you. I stood in Jenkins's office listening to 2 people who had planned my murder tear each other apart. The woman I'd loved for 30 years. The man who'd shaken my hand and told me I was making a smart financial decision. Jenkins looked at me. We got them both. I nodded, but I couldn't speak. In separate holding cells, Richard kept screaming that it was Linda's idea. Linda kept screaming that he was a coward. Their conspiracy was devouring itself, and I felt nothing at all. 2:22 in the afternoon. The paperwork took longer than the conspiracy. I sat in Jenkins's office while she processed forms, made calls, filed reports. Outside her window, I watched Linda being escorted through a door marked Intake. Orange jumpsuit, handcuffs. The woman I'd loved for 30 years reduced to a number in the system. I felt nothing. That numbness from the holding cells hadn't lifted. 4 o'clock. Jenkins set down her phone and handed me a folder. Linda's looking at 18 years, she said. Conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder insurance fraud. Richard gets 15. He's already trying to cut a deal, but the DA isn't interested. 18 years. Linda would be 73 when she got out. If she got out. And Danny? Jenkins's voice softened. 5 years parole possible in 3. His cooperation, the fact that he was a victim of grooming the DA, took that into account. He'll get protective custody, mandatory rehab counseling. 5 years. My son would be 30 when he walked out of prison, still young enough to rebuild, still young enough to have a life. You can see him, Jenkins said. Different room, no plexiglass this time. At 5 o'clock, a guard led me to a small visitation room, just a table and 2 chairs. Danny sat on one side, still in his orange jumpsuit, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. I sat across from him. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. You were brave today, I finally said. Danny shook his head. I was terrified. The whole time. I thought I was going to throw up when she mentioned the fentanyl. That's what makes it brave, acting even when you're scared. Here's what they don't tell you about forgiveness. It's not a moment. It's not something you say once and it's done. It's a choice you make every day, sometimes every hour. And sitting across from my son, the boy who once carried the device that changed everything, I made that choice. I'd keep making it, every Sunday, for as long as it took. Danny's eyes glistened. Dad, can you ever forgive me for what I almost did? Yes. The word came easier than I expected. I already have. He let out a breath, his shoulders dropping. But here's the harder question, I continued. Can you forgive yourself? Danny looked down at his hands. The same hands that had carried the device into my basement. The same hands that had dialed my number at 2 a.m. to save my life. I don't know, he whispered. I don't know if I should. That's what the next few years are for. Figuring that out. I reached across the table and took his hand. I'll visit every Sunday. We'll figure it out together. Even after everything... You're my son. Nothing changes that. Nothing ever will. Danny squeezed my hand. For a moment I saw him at 7 years old again, believing in magic. Maybe some magic was real. The guard came to take him back to his cell. Danny stood, then turned at the door. Dad, thank you for not giving up on me. I walked out of the jail into the parking lot. 5:30. The late afternoon sun was setting, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. The air was cool and clean after hours of institutional staleness. And there was Henry Martinez leaning against his red Tacoma, holding 2 coffee cups. His weathered face crinkled into a gentle smile when he saw me. Thought you could use this, he said quietly. I took the cup. The coffee was still warm, simple, perfect. How'd you know I'd be here? Henry shrugged. Figured you might need a friend. I did, more than I could say. I sat down on the parking lot curb beside Henry, cradling the warm coffee cup in my hands. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. Then Henry stared at his coffee and asked the question I'd never thought to ask. You ever wonder why I was on your street that night? I turned to look at him. His weathered face was still, but something behind his eyes was churning. I figured you were just driving your route. Henry shook his head slowly. My son Marcus died 6 years ago. March 19th, 2020. Carbon monoxide. Faulty space heater in his apartment. Marcus Martinez had been 28 years old, same age as Danny, when the carbon monoxide took him. An electrician newly married with his whole life ahead of him. Henry pulled a worn photo from his wallet, a young man with his father's kind eyes and a smile that didn't know what was coming. I found him 3 days later, Henry said, his voice cracking. 3 days. I kept thinking if I'd just checked on him sooner. He took a long breath. After that, I couldn't stop. bought a portable CO detector, drove neighborhoods at night, checked houses, basements, anywhere I could. People thought I was crazy. He paused. Maybe I was. Clara Martinez had held Henry together after Marcus died, he said. 40 years of marriage, and she'd carried him through the worst 3 years of his life, until cancer carried her away instead. After Clara, I lost everything. The house, the savings, the will to keep going. Lived in my truck. Delivered newspapers to survive. Kept driving at night with my detector because I didn't know what else to do. Think about that for a moment. A man loses his son to carbon monoxide. Loses his wife to cancer. Loses his home, his savings, his reason to live. And instead of giving up, he spends his nights driving through neighborhoods with a CO detector, trying to save strangers. That's not crazy. That's the purest kind of love, the kind that keeps giving even after it has nothing left. Henry looked up at the darkening sky. The night before I found the device at your place, I dreamed about Marcus. He was standing on a street I didn't recognize, pointing at a house. He said, "Dad, check the basement, please." A chill ran down my spine. I woke up at 3 a.m, Henry continued. Couldn't shake it. Started driving. And there it was, Riverside Drive, your house. I knew I had to check. We sat in silence as the last light faded from the sky. I thought about Danny at 7 making foam turtles. I thought about Marcus at 28, never knowing he wouldn't wake up. I thought about 2 fathers, one who lost his son, one who almost did. "Henry," I said finally, "you didn't just save my life." He looked at me, confusion in his tired eyes. "You saved Danny's soul. If I'd been gone, he'd have lived with that guilt forever. The guilt of killing his own father. It would have destroyed him worse than prison, worse than anything." I met Henry's gaze. "You saved both of us." Henry's eyes glistened. He looked down at his coffee, then back at me. "I've been trying to save Marcus for 6 years, he whispered. "In every basement, every house, every neighborhood. I never could." "Maybe you weren't supposed to save Marcus," I said quietly. "Maybe you were supposed to save me and Danny. Maybe that's what Marcus was trying to tell you." Henry didn't respond, but his hand reached over and gripped my arm, and he didn't let go for a long time. Henry wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "How do I even begin to repay you for what you just said?" I thought about the question. How do you repay someone for saving your life? Henry shook his head slowly. "You already did. For 9 months you saw me. Not the truck, not the poverty, not the crazy old man checking houses at night." His voice steadied. "You saw me. That was payment enough." I let that sink in. Every morning for 9 months, I'd handed Henry a coffee and treated him like any other customer. I hadn't known I was giving him something precious. I'd just been doing what felt right. "Well," I said, pulling out my phone, "I'm about to make another payment." I showed him a photo, a small storefront on Harbor Street, freshly painted with a for-lease sign in the window. "I'm opening a new shop, Harbor Street Coffee. I need a manager, someone I trust completely." Henry stared at the photo. "Mike, There's an apartment above," I continued, "rent-free, and there's a 2018 Tacoma arriving next week. Company vehicle." I paused. "Red, of course." Henry's face crumpled. 63 years old, and he cried like a child who'd just been told Christmas was coming after years of nothing under the tree. "When do I start?" he whispered. 8 months. That's all it took to transform a man who'd lost everything into someone who woke up excited to make coffee. 8 months of having a bed, a purpose, and someone who believed in him. Sometimes I wonder how many Henry Martinezes are out there sleeping in their trucks, waiting for someone to see them. November 9th, 2025, 6:15 in the morning. Henry arrived in his new red 2018 Toyota Tacoma license plate, HENRY-1, a small detail that made him tear up when he first saw it. He stepped out wearing a pressed white button-down shirt and black apron name tag reading, "Henry Martinez, Manager." He'd gained 15 pounds since March, healthy weight, that made him look 10 years younger, made the lines around his eyes softer instead of carved by grief. "Ready?" I asked. Henry nodded, keys jingling in his hand. "Been ready for 6 years. Just didn't know it until now." We unlocked the door together. The smell of fresh paint mixed with coffee beans. The espresso machine gleamed under new lights. On the wall behind the counter hung 2 framed photos. Danny at age 7 foam turtle in his cup grinning at the camera, and Marcus Martinez at his wedding arm around Clara smiling at a future he'd never see. Henry had cried when I'd suggested hanging Marcus's photo. Then he'd hugged me so hard I thought my ribs would crack. At 6:30 exactly, the bell over the door chimed. Tom Brennan walked in, 65 years old, and still built like the firefighter he used to be. He looked around at the fresh paint, the gleaming equipment, the 2 photos on the wall. "About damn time this street had a decent cup of coffee," he said. Henry moved to the espresso machine with a confidence I'd never seen in him before. He pulled the shot, steamed the milk, and poured a perfect heart into the foam of Tom's cortado. Tom took a sip, nodded slowly. Then he pulled a $10 bill from his wallet and stuffed it into a jar on the counter. The jar was labeled Henry's College Fund, a joke from opening week that had somehow stuck. "For the crooked sign," Tom said with a wink, "adds character." Henry laughed. A real laugh from somewhere deep? The sound filled the shop like steam from fresh coffee. 7 o'clock in the morning. The letter was 3 pages long. Danny had never written me more than a sentence before prison. I sat at the counter during the quiet hours between rushes. Henry wiping down tables behind me. The email had arrived minutes earlier, subject line, "Letter from Daniel Rhodes." I opened the attachment. 3 handwritten pages scanned by the prison, dated October 28th, 2025. I read my son's words aloud, not because Henry needed to hear them, but because I needed to say them. 237 days clean today. I count them every morning. It's the first thing I do when I wake up. His handwriting had changed, steadier now, more deliberate. "I'm learning to speak again, Dad. Not just words, my own thoughts. For years I only heard her voice telling me what to think, what to want, who to be. Now I'm finding mine. It's quieter than hers. But it's real." I had to stop reading. Henry pretended not to notice me wiping my eyes. "Mom got 18 years. Richard got 15. I'll be out when I'm 29. I know that's a long time, but I'm using it. Working in the kitchen, learning to cook. They say I make the best scrambled eggs in the block. 29 years old. That's when Danny will walk out of prison. He went in at 26, manipulated by his mother, addicted to substances she provided, convinced that killing me was love. He'll come out clean, clear-eyed, and ready to make foam turtles. Some people say prison doesn't rehabilitate, but sometimes it gives a person the one thing they never had: silence, long enough to hear their own voice. The letter continued. "Do you remember the magic coffee turtle I was 7? You let me pour the foam. I thought I was the best barista in the world. I still remember thinking you could do actual magic. I want to learn to make them for real, Dad. If there's still a place for me." I folded the letter carefully and slid it into my apron pocket next to my heart. At 9 o'clock, during another quiet moment, I made a cortado, the same drink I'd been making for 30 years. Steam rose from the cup, curling in the morning light that streamed through our windows. I placed it on the counter before a framed photo. Danny at 7 years old, grinning at the camera, a foam turtle floating in his cup. The photo had hung in every shop I'd ever owned. It would hang in every shop I'd ever own. 3 years, son, I said quietly. I'll be here every Sunday until then, and when you come home, this coffee will be waiting. Henry appeared beside me. He looked at the photo, then at me, then at the cortado, cooling on the counter. "He's going to be okay," Henry said. "Yeah." I picked up the cup and took a sip. "He is." I thought about the past 8 months. Henry's shaking hands that first morning in March, the photos on his phone, the device in my basement, Linda's cold smile through the plexiglass, Danny's scream of, "I did it for you," Richard's cracking voice blaming everyone but himself. And I thought about the $1.2 million, the price they'd put on my life, the money that was supposed to make my death worthwhile. I never imagined that a cup of coffee and a few kind words could be worth more than $1.2 million. But Henry taught me something that no insurance policy could ever cover. The smallest act of kindness can save a life, and sometimes it can save 2. Looking back on everything that happened, I realized the hardest truth wasn't the crime itself. It was how easily trust can blind us. I believed that loyalty inside a family could never be broken, yet my life became a painful lesson in family betrayal. When someone you once called family chooses greed over love, the wound cuts deeper than any enemy ever could. That is the cruel reality of family betrayal, and it can happen quietly, right inside your own home. If there is one thing I want you to learn from my story, it's this: don't ignore the small signs. Trust the people you love, but never stop paying attention. I waited too long to question what didn't make sense, and that nearly cost me my life. No one wants to imagine family betrayal, but denying its possibility only gives it power. In the end, what kept me standing wasn't revenge, it was accountability and the belief that justice still matters. Watching the truth come out in court reminded me that family justice isn't about hatred. It's about protecting what is right when everything else falls apart. Sometimes family justice means setting boundaries, even when the person on the other side once shared your last name. And sometimes family justice simply means choosing to live on without letting bitterness destroy your heart. My personal belief now is simple: forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean welcoming danger back into your life. It means refusing to let darkness define who you become. And through all of this, I held on to one quiet faith: that God sees the truth even when the world doesn't. Thank you for staying with me through this entire journey. Share your thoughts in the comments. What would you do if you found yourself in Mike's position, facing such a painful choice? I'd genuinely like to hear your perspective. If this story resonated with you, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next stories we share. And just a small note: while this narrative draws inspiration from complex family conflicts and justice themes, certain elements have been dramatized to enhance the storytelling experience.